listen-only mode.
And good morning or good afternoon, everybody, depending on what time zone you're in. I see we have a nice large crowd today, so I'll go ahead and get started with our educational series. I'll spend just the first couple of minutes introducing today's topic and myself via PowerPoint and maybe a website or two, but we'll spend the bulk of the time inside the application. All attendees are in listen-only mode, so you're muted. So you do have the opportunity to take advantage of the chat area to ask some questions along with the question queue. And at the tail end of today's phone call, I'll also open up the floor for any questions and answers. So welcome everybody. Today is one of many of our educational series. Let me start by going out to our website, msxgroup.com, and that's probably how you found out and signed up for today's session. And there's actually going to be two I'm going to focus on today, and they're going to be, today's session right now is going to be migrating from the Microsoft FRx and Management Reporter to Prospero, which will be reporting focused. And then later today, I'll also be doing a second session for those that are on the budgeting side using Microsoft Forecast or any other Excel hell means of budgeting. We're going to have a nice little session about how you can seamlessly transition from Microsoft Forecast or other budgeting tools to Prospero. Secondly, I would like to personally invite all of you because twice a year we have some nice user forums. Of course, these are the monthly sessions. We have probably about 5 to 6 little 1-hour sessions throughout the month. But twice a year we have our user forums, which is 2 full days of product training, which is also CPE credit eligible for those accountants and CPAs in the room. And our April forum is going to be upcoming on April 22nd and 23rd. The day one is going to be focused on the Microsoft legacy products of Management Reporter and Forecaster on that Thursday, April 22nd. And then our second day, April 23rd, is going to be focused on Prospero. So I'd like to personally invite one of all of you to those upcoming sessions. Now, let me take a second to further introduce today myself and the MSX group because we have usually a mixed bag of attendees. Some might be existing customers of ours, like those that have purchased Prospero. There might be some that we're still supporting on the legacy applications, like the good old FRx, Management Reporter, and Forecaster, and we're still going to be supporting those for many years ahead. You might get sort of the scare tactics by others saying, hey, the products are going to blow up on you. No, they're not, but they're no longer officially supported by Microsoft, but by all means we will in the foreseeable future as long as you're utilizing those. And my name's Derek.Krebs. I always like to say I'm a consultant, not a sales or marketing guy, so I shoot from the hip, and I'm going to really just share some experiences within these applications of the 25 years I have been a consultant in this realm. And like my credentials you see here, most within our MSX group company have similar backgrounds, which if we turn the clock back going on about 25 years ago, most of us started at FRx software. We then had a great reporting tool and then budgeting as well with the Microsoft Forecaster, so good that we were acquired by Microsoft. And we internally worked at Microsoft going on about 12 to 15 of those years, and just like we got acquired, 10 years ago we got spun off as the MSX group, and so thankful we did because now we have product development control back underneath our belt, which means, hey, we have great new products, features, and functionality. So I'll shed a little bit more light on that in today's session. And here, just a couple more quick little PowerPoint slides to introduce the product, Prospero, in case some of you might be new to that. Well, definitely it's going to do the 2 primary functions that most of you power users that say attending these calls are in charge of, that being the reporting side, and secondly, the budgeting/forecasting, which I'll use those terms interchangeably. So it's going to produce all of your general ledger reports like income statements, balance sheets, cash flows. And a keyword there was general ledger data and reports. However, Prospero has a very flexible data warehouse where you can include non-GL data and including budgets. Some examples of non-GL data might be some employee data like headcount, or units sold, margins, prices, etc., and even non-general ledger segments. So in our demonstration later today, you're going to hear me talk about multi-company scenario, along with good old departments and accounts, but there might be instances where you want to report on some non-general ledger segments. Some examples might be, how about on the sales side? I want to maybe budget and report down to the customer product level, or maybe on the budgeting side down to the employee level. Those might not be segments or dimensions in my general ledger system, but we do have that flexibility within Prospero to handle such. And a couple other bullet points in this slide. We have some nice interactive charts and graphs, including drill down to the account and transaction detail. That way you can see further information behind your financials, not only you, the power user, but especially your end users. And today's emphasis, that last bullet point, well, since we have that background within Microsoft, one of our differentiators of Prospero, there's a long list how we stand out apart from the rest, but one of those is we can take all of your hard work of your reports in FRx and Management Reporter, and we can convert them inside the tool, which is going to save you weeks and months and tens of thousands of dollars on if you were to consider any other options or products out there in the market. So that's one of several of our differentiators. Now within the reports, there's a couple little screen captures. I'll show you three-dimensionally inside the application here in a moment. Like the charting and graphing, I sort of sometimes call that dashboarding, including one of the financials like an income statement I'm sharing. And thankfully, what we did with all those lessons learned when owned and working at Microsoft, we took the best things of those legacy products, brought them into Prospero, and those areas that are lacking and not available or poor, we definitely improved upon those. So my focus on today's session as well is going to be showing you new features and functionalities to leverage, and also I'll end with a slide here just talking about your current pain points that we've lived ourselves and how we've improved upon those and fixing those pain points. And my other little interpretation of this slide is one of the best things we brought in from those applications were the industry standard and accountant friendly rows, columns, and trees. Like if I broke down a report, there and to the left in blue, I might have a row definition, like an income statement detail. Or secondly, there in red, I might have a column definition looking at month and year to date or different variations of columns. And third at the very top in this two-dimensional slide, it represents different reporting trees that might give us the ability easily do multi-company consolidation and or break out my financials by your different additional general ledger segments like location and department. I'll use commonly in today's theme that's in our demonstration database. And we can mix and match these building blocks seamlessly within the application. And let me even just show you something, because a lot of people even are coming off of some Excel add-in applications, because within the Excel add-in world, which sometimes I despise because I have no visibility, you might see your financial reports like in this flavor, meaning all individual Excel files, you'll have no visibility at all to what row, column, or tree are utilized, who last modified it, where they're shared, and where they're interchangeable, because maybe 3 of those reports, but I have no clue, might share the same income statement structure. Now, hand in hand with that thought, let me now open up Prospero. And actually, I have a few different sessions logged in to Prospero. One primarily would be the role of a power user that most attending on today's phone call sits in the finance and accounting area. And the second role or position that I'll role play with would be an end user perspective. Now, related to that nice little inventory of where we took the best industry standard rows, columns, and trees, I'm logged in as a power user. I have various links here to the left here. And notice it's a nice Microsoft Office type look and feel and navigation, especially coming from the Manager Reporter. We wanted that transition to be seamless. I'm coming here to this button, what's called the catalog view. And unlike the Excel hell add-in world, I just sort of relived or horror story acquainted you with, is I'm now seeing a list of all my financial reports inside the system. In any one of these headings, like my line set, I'm just going to click on that heading, and what I could easily see is, hey, all these reports are using the same single line set called my income statement. I then have additional columns here of who last created, modified it, and when. So great. I have that reusable interchangeable nature and the visibility behind such. And let me even take this one financial report, and let me also set the stage of about 5 or 6 bullet points of pain points that I'm going to get in the next few or first minutes of today's session. And I'll be sure to pass along this PowerPoint slide deck for those that have both attended and registered for today's session. Here's a quick little slide about budgeting. I might spend just a couple minutes on today's session just to confirm, yes, there's great budgeting abilities, but my afternoon session today, please stick around if you're available to. If not, we do record these sessions that we'll be putting out to our website, and I'll be sharing that link as well to us here. Now, I like to finish up at least before I get into some of the ins and outs of the product to further set the stage of the left-hand column headed what your current challenges and deficiencies are in your world today that I've seen and hear so many times in today's world, versus the column to the right, the lessons learned in our Prospero fixes and solutions to those. I'm just going to touch upon these ever so quickly, and I'll maybe reiterate some later in today's call. The first line, well, unfortunately, as those Microsoft products are being sunsetted, there's really not been any new features, no new features of the last 5 to close to 8 years in those applications. However, Prospero, yep, has definitely ongoing development, regular new features coming out close to quarterly, mostly too coming from product feedback coming from our customer base, which I'll show you some nice online help and a little feedback tool that you can help further shape the direction of our product. The second line, security, especially I'm going to talk and focus more on the Manager Reporter side in FRx. In Manager Reporter, it was very decentralized security. In Manager Reporter, I had to go inside the report library to all my different folders. I could have had 10, 100 different folders. I had to go to every individual folder to say who or cannot see which reports within that folder. And then the second layer of security outside of folder security is what we call tree security inside Manager Reporter. Very painful, decentralized, where I had to go to all my different trees and all the individual tree units within to define who can or cannot see these different location company or departments. Stunk. Where Prospero, we've learned from that. We have a nice centralized security area, and probably 2 keywords I'll bullet point now in security. We have what are called assignments, like Bob or Jane can see this many companies or location and departments. And then secondly, key term is visibility. Like, do they have the visibility to income statement? Yes. Or do they have the visibility to the balance sheet? Maybe no. Or how about on the budgeting side? Do they have visibility to our base case budget that everybody's working on? Yes. Or maybe the best case or worst case of my 5-year plan? Maybe not. So we have visibility at the report and budget version level. Third item, and maybe one extra little bullet point on that security line 2 is in Manager Reporter. Another thing that was very painful is if someone changed management responsibility, how about Bob had just Department A, but now Bob got promoted. Maybe Bob's now departments B, C, and D, something completely different. In Manager Reporter, you would have to rerun all your reports over time, meaning it's not real time and seamless, versus Prospero it is. But in Manager Reporter, you had to have to rerun all of your reports over time and go back to all those individual folders and tree units to re-divvy out Bob or Sally, whatever their new management responsibilities might be. Third bullet point, Manager Reporter had 4 rigid roles, which means no, I cannot modify or create my own. I had to work within those, but Prospero allows you to have your own custom tailored roles based on what a user can see or do within the application. Speaking of application, the fourth line, a lot of you are probably doing 2 separate processes and applications for both the reporting and budgeting side, of course, and even the Microsoft world. But all of those years at Microsoft conferences, we always had lofty goals to combine the 2 products into one, but that never took fruition based on all the red tape we had at Microsoft. But now, once Prospero's leased about 9 years ago to the market, it's now one seamless product that does both budgeting and reporting to avoid double the work. Fifth item, and I'll have one final slide, then I'll get inside the application, is our line set maintenance. Perfect example is if I added new revenue expense accounts to my general ledger, it was a very painful process to hopefully remember which reports and line sets on both the reporting and secondary product on the budgeting side to update those. But now usually in Prospero, we usually can strive for zero or low maintenance by using what we call summary accounts and the expand feature. Or sixth item, when we moved from FRx product to Manager Reporter, I wish I had more say-so in that product development transition, but nope, did not with the Microsoft red tape. Microsoft yanked away some of the former output options, where in Manager Reporter, you only could output to the viewer, which stunk. All the users using FRx, they still wanted to go directly to Excel, or they still wanted to go to printer. We've brought those back now in Prospero. So we still have the viewer, otherwise known as the workspace, where I can output reports to, including Excel, PDF, and the printer. Now, additionally, there was a term in Manager Reporter called report groups. They're now called report collections, which really just means, hey, at month end, maybe I'm cranking out 5, 10, or whatever reports all in one fell swoop. Well, yes, I can definitely group those, but Manager Reporter, you had to, especially if you wanted going to printer Excel, you had to open every individual report up in Manager Reporter, then maybe disseminate it to some extra means like printer Excel. However, in Prospero, using that report collection, I can seamlessly output multiple reports to a single file or the printer or PDF as you need be, but most people are going to leverage the workspace viewer, as I'll further get to in the start of today's session. Last couple of bullet points to set the stage. Drill down order. Manager Reporter really does not allow you on the fly to change going from, let's say, company to a location or vice versa. Maybe location first, company second. We have no ability to change the drill order, but definitely we've added that ability in Prospero, which translated means instead of having 3 or 4 different reports in Manager Reporter, usually I can have one single nimble report in Prospero to be able to slice and dice my data, to easily analyze and see my data and exceptions too. Maybe the 9th item, every time I generate a report in Manager Reporter, it stored every single version of that report, which might even be hundreds or thousands of times. Maybe I ran even a single report given a year, a couple years, and I can't tell you how many times when I've done an upgrade of Manager Reporter, it would fail due to this huge Manager Reporter library, which was so painful to reduce its size or clean up my reports, and failed on upgrade migration. So we've learned from those lessons, and then we have a nice little publish reports area where only when you have your final blessed copy after your month-end close is maybe when you want to publish that only single copy out instead of the hundreds or thousands during a certain time interval. 10th item really goes back to the general ledger and non-GL data, which I'm always a big fan of using statistics and KPIs like key performance indicators in my financial reports, where Prospero now has its own data warehouse to include that GL and non-GL data, including budgets. Now, sometimes even I hate saying the word data warehouse, especially data mart, because I've been burnt so many times with Manager Reporter's poor design in its data mart and what they call change tracking. What we did, we rebuilt the entire data warehouse from the grounds up, and I've been on hundreds of support issues with Manager Reporter's data mart where I had to rebuild it, but thankfully very few or hardly no calls on Prospero's data mart. So good news to our product development and QA team, lessons learned to redesign that. And final little bullet point for maybe those prospective people that usually what we see is Prospero being a fraction of the cost. I'll like to repeat maybe the good old FRx and Management Reporter report conversion, because that could save me weeks and months of tens of thousands of dollars there on that side, including also the license side. All right. Thank you for letting me set the stage on that. Let me even start with a couple of those bullet points, and since today's session might be a little abbreviated because we have some more in-depth trainings or sessions devoted to certain topics, this will be a little bit more high-level holistic. The first is I'm showing you perhaps maybe me, the CFO. Maybe I log in each morning. I'm looking at really what I call a report collection. I even can access this report collection through what we call a quick launch area. And not only do I have my financial reports like the two to the left, but I might have some graphical displays of that data to the right. Now, second little window I want to briefly show you is from an end user perspective. Whenever you launch Prospero, it usually takes you to this nice landing page, what we call our quick launch window. Here's a column headed Reports and Charts. So how about every month, my boss, Derek, the CFO, Derek, sends to me, the manager, maybe 2 reports. Maybe report 1, my actual versus budget, or the second one below, maybe a rolling 12-month, including last year, so I can see a nice trend, good or bad. Now, when I do open up this financial report, one of the key words from earlier on security is what we call the assignments. Because now when I open up and run this report, and also acquaint you with our general ledger segments and companies, now notice here we have a company segment or dimension that I'm being prompted for. So any of you that are in a multi-company environment, many times that's not a segment in my general ledger, but thankfully what we do in Prospero is create your different companies as a segment or dimension. That way you can seamlessly consolidate. And I'll add some more remarks to that later. Now, looking at the location, especially for this end user that I'm currently on, they have limited access rights, seeing only a single location. So I'm just going to come inside this locational pick list just to confirm this end user only has access to Denver. Now, within my Denver location I'm in charge of, I have several departments like sales or marketing, and that's really my last little prompt of this report. I'm just going to open it up in what we call our all segment or node. Now, speaking of, another nice new feature that was manual and tedious within Management Reporter and FRx is you always had to create your trees from scratch, and as new departments and accounts get added, you always had to maintain those. So when I'm looking at the different departments, this is what I call my list view of my different departments that for my Denver location I have, but I'm going to click on this button to use a tree view, which out of the box, meaning without me doing nothing, we automatically have this all tree, which automatically gets created and automatically maintains. So as new departments get added, I never have to touch this tree. And that's also great in the budgeting side, as I may be budgeting new departments or locations, that same type of story. So there's one emphasis you'll hear a little bit further later on these trees. The second example I'm going to talk about trees is on our account segment. So any of you that use the Microsoft forecasting budgeting tool, it had a great ability for your account segment to create logical groupings, like here's all my sales accounts or all my salaries accounts. And then I could seamlessly define those summary accounts in one single account tree and then use it across the application. So we've leveraged and used that design also within the reporting element that I'll get to in just a second. Now, when I do open up the report, and I have a couple windows open already just to save a few seconds of time, let me now role play that, how about you, my boss, want to hear from me why I'm over or under a budget. So one of your first little visual cues is these little blue dots to the left. Those are accounts with memos or notes. And then what I could do here to the right, sometimes I hide it unless I want to see extra detail, but I'm going to come up here and I'm going to thumbtack and not auto hide those notes. It's going to nicely give me a time date stamp because I'm logged in as a generic user called Manager 1, but this might be Sally Jones on this date and time, added this memo or note for the account. That way, if any of you want to further maybe share financial footnotes, you don't have to pick up phone calls or do tedious emails or separate docs. You'll have that all self-contained within this report to then further share with others. We'll also look at that briefly when we get on the budgeting side. The ability to maybe do some footnotes as your budgeting items. Now, some other nice aspects within Prospero would be the graphing ability, the drill down to account and transaction level, including changing my drill order. Let me come to one of those, meaning account and transaction level. I'm going to drill into this sales line. I do not have to have general ledger access. I simply have to be a user defined in Prospero. That way I'm great. The auditors love hearing that, meaning I'm securely logging in, meaning I'm not sending this financial data, slinging Excel files or printed copies, because I can't tell you how many horror stories I've had people be sued based on bad legal data, financial data getting in the wrong hands. Now when I'm drilling in, I can see all the way down to the account level, including transaction level. Now notice these two columns to the right, they did not appear on this little last level, which I'm going to call my account level, like looking at maybe sales data or marketing as I drilled into my sales. Now here's a nice little tab, that 2 additional columns when I drilled into my transaction detail show. And then obviously for legal reasons, our vendors and customers we just have as a simple numeric, but it would say something like Office Depot or Staples. It would give me nice descriptions of where that financial data came from. In this case, sales, maybe what customer, or maybe if it was an expense of who I paid it to. So that will be at your and your end user's fingertips if you want them to drill into transaction detail, and if you give them that security role or assignment. And I can multitask. I can go back up a level. Now, some other trivial things that you almost expect, and it's implied, is when I drilled in this sales line, which I'm going to do one more time, when I do so, I'm drilling across all columns, meaning actual, prior year, budget, and variance, because another differentiator, which stands Prospero apart from many of the rest, is a lot of other applications, when you drill in, it's only to a single cell, meaning I only can see this 229,000. I cannot see it compared to prior year and budget. So there's one great thing. Additionally, I'm going to go now into a power user that has access to more data. So the sales dollar is a little higher. Earlier, we're looking at a single location. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to transition to 2 other key things and new features as people might be transitioning. That being graphical ability and changing the drill order. Like this $2 million. And I might prefer, as the CFO, my first click or drill down might be into the company. Like here is company 1 US, company 2 Europe, or maybe my elimination company. Maybe these first 2 are in a general ledger system. We have interfaces to over 20 accounting systems and different versions of, but maybe this elimination is coming maybe from a different ERP system, or even it's mainly coming from some Excel or some other database. So I'm thinking about some real case instances where we've met customers' needs by being able to link to other GL systems or data like that elimination. And my first click was going into company, but maybe my second click, I'm drilling into my US company, are now the locations within. And we're still looking at a sales analysis. Well, if I want to do some nice little graphical display, like that quote, "A picture speaks 1,000 words," I'm clicking on that button called Display as a Chart. And this is also an interactive chart where even I'm going to go back up a level. And before I lose one thought, I'm going to get to graphing in just a second, a little bit further, because I want to emphasize when I drilled into my sales, my first click, I was into different companies like US and Europe. And then my second click was down to the locational analysis. Now, what I can easily do is I just close out my location or company analysis on the fly. And a great new feature is our ability to change the drill order. So this button called Change Drill Order, my first click was company, second click location. I'm just going to drag location to the top. As this sentence reads, just drag and drop. Now when I drill in, instead of company 1, 2, 3 as my first click, it's now location 1, 2, 3. This time when I'm displaying the chart, instead of just looking at US sales, this is across all companies, maybe based on some location or departmental breakdown. This is also an interactive graph. We have about 8 or 9 different graph types. An interactive meaning, hey, I can drill in one step further, this now being the companies. Now notice here to the right, I have my now company analysis. And instead of a graphical view, I easily can revert back to what we call the report view. So here is now that drilled down by company, perhaps of this single location based on whatever level you wanted to further analyze. If I wanted to send this out to Excel, I have this button on the toolbar to further do some ad hoc analysis or sharing of that data. And once this renders, I'm going to call this a 2-dimensional Excel file, meaning really I'm just looking at one Excel sheet. But great, I have all the formatting, the bolding. I even have formulas exported to do some further ad hoc and sharing. Now, a second example I already have open to save time is a three-dimensional one. So here might be all locations rolled up, or here's Miami Department A, or Miami Department B, or maybe another location. This might be one single report, like an income statement, but how about better yet, maybe it's my job every month to send my board of directors 3 reports. So I do now have another Excel output that I'm sending to my board member who gets sheet or report number 1 an income statement, or report or sheet number 2 a balance sheet, or maybe report or sheet number 3 a cash flow. And I seamlessly produced all of these in one fell swoop with one simple report collection inside the system. And let me just show you that at a high level. So inside Prospero, we have these report collections. You can have as many different report collections as you want. And as I open one of these, here's maybe report 1, 2, or 3. I have the add and remove buttons to add additional reports or remove them. And then in the output tab, you have some nice options we brought back additionally, meaning in Management Reporter, you only could go to the viewer, which we call the workspace, but we've brought those others back like printer, Excel, PDF, and the publish reports. Now the publish reports I shared with you briefly earlier when I looked as the end user, what I call my blessed or publish reports, where I added that little financial footnote. So that's a nice little repository where you can add financial footnotes, etc. And then if I were to going out to Excel or any one of these means, I just wanted to point additionally, here's a little button, like in my demonstration, those 3 reports like balance sheet, cash flow, etc. I did to one single file, but I can turn that off and maybe have multiple reports going to multiple different files. So good, at least you have that ability, which Management Reporter, you'd have to do all individually to maybe print or Excel. I do have another flavor open, meaning that was just workspace to begin with. Secondly, I showed you Excel in a few different varieties. And maybe third example might be PDF. Here is a multi-company report, like I'm looking at all companies' income statement, or maybe page 2 might be company 1, US, etc. So I could also seamlessly output to this mechanism as well. But usually we recommend the secure electronic drill down nature, as we earlier chatted about. Now, as I'm going to go back inside the designer view, let me just close a couple of tabs so I don't have too much open. I wanted to add a couple other remarks on graphing. Now, within Prospero, I'm going to take you back to the original report definition. And those using FRx and Management Reporter, yeah, you're going to see the very familiar lines and columns. And I'm going to show you a little bit behind the scenes because it has a nice seamless transition. Yes, we can convert all those reports. So how about maybe a quick time or two? I'm going to come back here to home catalog view. Yep, this might have been my 3 months worth of effort, where we can automatically bring that into Prospero to save me tons of time and money. Now, I'm going to call that the old way, meaning we can bring your report across as is, but there's going to be some new features, especially summary accounts and expand, I'll get to in just a second. The last remark I wanted to make on charting is there's this tab here called Chart. If you want a chart, all you have to do is turn on this little check mark. And then when I mention several different graphical types, here's then where I can choose it. Where a lot of other people, how we differentiate Prospero from others is, no, you don't have to be an Excel master to do Excel graphing. No, you do not have to buy Power BI or some other dashboarding tool and buy a separate license for that. It's all self-contained. All you have to do is turn on this little check mark, and that produces the graph. So we always like to show you behind the scenes that super easy to create some of these outputs that we're sharing with you. As I continue, let's look briefly at the line and column use for the report, as I'm just going to close a couple of tabs. Now also, I like this tabular view because I can multitask. I can go back a tab or two. I could also right-click to show some of these tabs side by side. And let me just do one quick little thing here. Now, if I wanted to multitask, yeah, I could maybe do some tabs side by side, one next to another. And that's one of our earlier views that I'm going to go back to, which was my report collection. Like me, the CFO, I see these 4 reports maybe side by side. I can expand to further maybe interact and work with it, but there are some little tiled windows based on how maybe you want to consume the data, or expanding or side by side type. But usually I'll just focus on a single report and window to not get too fancy, but you can easily do so with a click or two of what you want seen or not. Now, one of the most painful things was adding new accounts to the system. I'm also going to throw in some very simple, trivial things. One being, I'm going to show hidden columns. Well, in this example, it might be that glamorous, but still, it's very nice because, hey, I'm an accountant. I like seeing the account numbers to the left. Or a second example might be when I show hidden columns, instead of one single quarterly or year-to-date column, maybe I show hidden columns to show me maybe the months of the quarter, or maybe the months of the year, without having to be a very cluttered report where you can have both a summary and detail. Because in your world today, what I just demonstrated, you'd again have to have a second, third, or fourth different report to accomplish now what one report does. And that even goes back to that change drill order remark. Now, my emphasis is one of the painful things you're living today with FRx and Management Reporter is whenever I add a new general ledger account, I'm going to call this an income statement detail, I have to remember all the different rows and lines to add that to. In contrast, in Prospero, we simply use one single summary account. You can give it any name you want, like we called it EXPN for total expenses. Above this row, I'm showing all the detail, and then I'm going to open up respectively the line involved along with the column. Starting with the line set, most line sets we always recommend using just the natural account only for flexibility. Well, here at the very top, this is what I call the old manual way to individually list your accounts. The new, better way is to use a summary account. You can name these summary accounts anything you wish. I'm going inside this little pick list. Now, here's my graphical tree. Most companies only need one account tree that handles both your balance sheet and income statement. I'm just going to focus on the income statement. I call this net income. Beneath, I have expenses or gross profit, which the latter, gross profit, might be revenue and COGS netted to one another. But let's just focus on expenses. And maybe in my general ledger, expenses are the range of accounts 6,000 to 7,999. Another way to phrase that, I do not have to update this account tree, nor I do not have to update my line set as new accounts get added. And let me show you another perspective of that. This is what I call a tree read-only view of my accounts. I can come up here and turn that off like we saw briefly when I was choosing my different locations or departments. Well, I can definitely see my accounts. Like here might be accounts that begin with a 5 for expenses, etc. So I always can see my accounts. And this is a real-time read from your general ledger. Thankfully, out of the box, you don't have to do tricked out programming language. We already had the interface of the 20+ ERP accounting systems and versions. And I'm now going to go full circle. That is this summary account. Let's look briefly at trees. Singly and centrally, let's focus on our natural account. Usually instead of multiple trees we have, here's one single tree. Here's that expenses. Here's that range. I can double click to see that range of what accounts fall within it. And if I wanted to do a range or wildcard, this window allows me to easily bring in individual accounts or ranges. And I can also go full circle like, hey, this summary account called EXPN, I'm going to right mouse click, and where is this used? So what I can easily now do is this one summary account for total expenses, it's used in all these different line sets. So if I change my mind, maybe my crazy controller wants me to move this one labor account. Instead of extraordinary items within gross profit, they decide to put it in expenses. I simply just drag that account up to that little node, and then going back, right mouse click where used. I do not have to update all these different lines, rows, etc. And at least I see that visibility. Versus maybe occasionally I'll give you the horror story, like in the Excel add-in world, I would never see what row, column, or tree are used, who last modified it, and where that single summary account expenses are used if I change my mind. So huge win as a consultant or people helping deploy the product to make it seamless and bring the easy button to that process. Now I'll probably segue from trees. How about I'll just show you maybe just one last example since it only just takes me a moment to do so. I'm going to, within our trees, let's look briefly at our locations and our regional tree because I reside out here in California. How about let's role play I'm the Midwest manager. Well, in your manager reporter and FRx trees, for let's say a Midwest node of your tree that might be multiple different locations within, you would have to have all these individually listed. However, in Prospero, I can have the best of both worlds, meaning I could look at all of Midwest, like at this 40,000 ID or node, whatever we name it as, or also I could look at my financial report at these individual levels. And let me just give you a graphic of that, but I could also do the same little drag and dropping, because how about now Derek gets these 2 additional locations and I'm just dragging and dropping multiple units all at once. All right, I'm going to close and not save some things so I don't tamper with my second session later today. When I mentioned I can run reports for multiple companies or departments all in one fell swoop, I'm going to go back to one of my earlier report versions. And this button here, what is called Reopen a Report, 9 times out of 10, I like to look from the top level down and leverage the drill down and change in the sort order. Now here, if I wanted to come here for the company, I can come up here and choose, let's say, company 1 and 2. And that's where now, instead of looking at each individual company or drilling down, here's maybe one way of couple that I can run the report for multiple companies all in one fell swoop. And that's really just sort of leveraging and emphasizing the tree structure again. As I have just a second to kill as this generates now for company 1 and company 2 separately, as I was looking at them combined earlier. And how about Bob, whenever he or she logs in? They perhaps only get company 1, or Sally, maybe they get assigned only company 2. So here, notice the heading. Here's now my financial report for Europe, or here this other report. Here's now my financial report for just the US location on my heading. Now, one quick little side step I'm going to do, because it's so accountant friendly, these products created by accountants for accountants, is our security. I usually just sit down for about maybe 30 minutes with some of your end users. We don't need IT. We love them, but we don't need IT. I'm going to come here to the user definition, because unlike Manager Reporter that had 4 rigid roles or groups, here's what I'm going to call group or role 1, group or role 2, 3, 4, etc. And I can easily right mouse click to add a new user and or role. Now, speaking of users, more often than not, they would be what we call Windows Network users, which IT loves hearing that, Windows Network user, because that means we do not have to maintain and create separate user IDs and passwords. We leverage your network logins. But there might be some banker or board member who's maybe not on your network, so we also can create what we call standard users to give you that flexibility, meaning not one way, only way. We give you usually a couple of options best to meet your needs or flexibility for. Now, final little key thing I wanted to highlight on security is what we call assignments, and then finally, visibility. So how about this one user? Let's call it Bob. I'm highlighting it. Usually you'd read their name like Bob Jones, and then here's this button called assignments. In our demonstration company, we have multi-company, like here, this one little pick list I'm showing you of the company field. The asterisk means they get access to everything. We also have that all tree, which automatically gets created and maintained, that I like to maybe emphasize or repeat a couple of times in a session. So there's maybe another instance where I can give them access to all companies. And then here is for the location, like my Midwest earlier example, maybe this person is in charge of maybe 3,000. That way, if they change responsibility, I just change it so centrally in one spot, meaning that tree, and then it's going to flow its way downward, meaning I do not, like in Manager Reporter, I don't have to go to all my folders, all my different tree units, or I don't have to rerun reports. It will be real time whenever I change their assignments. And I can get further granular down to the department, even the accountant line set level. So based on what needs you have for restricting access or providing it. Now, a confident reply of both and mainly the product's ability in our experience with is there's really not been a financial report or not been a budget model I've not been able to produce out of Prospero, speaking of its power and flexibility and ease. Okay. Now, that was, again, security assignments. I can click on the insert button if I need to get more granular, but usually we only have one or a couple of lines where they're given access to maybe a group of location or departments via our trees, but there's just me demonstrating where I can get more micro or granular if need be. Now, the second thing is visibility. Let me bring up an example I briefly alluded to earlier. That is, how about I have two financial reports? One being an income statement I want all my users to see, but how about a second report, a balance sheet I do not? So I'm on my income statement. Here's this button called visibility, and I might have an easy button saying, okay, great. Maybe all users can see this report, like the income statement, or maybe the balance sheet not. Maybe the balance sheet, I turn that off, and then I might restrict it. Instead of everybody seeing this balance sheet, maybe I could come up here and add additional lines because maybe it's a role called my board of directors or accounting group that maybe get to see this report. So I can even get down to the granular user level, but probably more efficiently at the role or group level, or even everybody. But there is the visibility we easily have at the report level and or budget version level, which probably will be on my second session today on budgeting focused there. Now, speaking of budgeting focus, let me just show you one little splash screen. I'm now back in as my end user. Let me go to my quick launch because one-click favorite might be to my month-end report, or here might be that time of year where they want me to do management to update my budget. So I'm going to click on this button, and I have a budget screen open here for what I'll call Department A. Or I'm going to click on this button here. I'm then going to open up the item for Department B. Now, we always call Prospero, or at least I do, Excel on steroids, because now if I'm toggling between Department A and Department B, we share and use the same row or line template for maybe all the masses of the departments. So as I open up two departments, you're going to notice they have the same look and feel. But then what I'm going to do is in just a second, I'm going to open up a completely different department that I have for my sales data. Because here again, this tab for Department A, maybe I want to budget to it, or Department B, same sort of overall look and feel. Now finally, and I'm only going to wrap up for maybe a minute or two on the budget side, and I'll wrap up with some other reporting nice new features, is I'm going to go to now a completely different department where I'm even budgeting to segments that are not in my general ledger. Now, two examples I brought up earlier, but we'll now visually see that. One would be, in my general ledger, I do not have products, like here in yellow. I do not have product 10 motors in my general ledger. I do not, in my general ledger, have product 20 compressors. But that does not mean I cannot budget or record access to that within this nice, nimble, flexible data warehouse of Prospero's. Then additionally, in my general ledger, I do not have a statistic for units sold, nor a statistic for price per unit or COGS per unit. I can easily include that in my budgets and or reports. And how about some other maybe 1-minute little tutorial? One of the largest costs of organizations is their payroll items, including statistics for headcount, FTEs, life insurance payroll tax, where it automatically stops. And here on the HR tab, I might have it by name or position, like name Bob Sally, or by position, I might need this many registered nurses, this many LPNs, CNAs, nurse side assistants. Here's when they start and end, hourly or salary, bonuses, overtimes as high-level macro or low-level micro you need to get. And then even in our MSX group, we have employees in about 12 different states. I reside here in California, so maybe when Derek gets loaded, we have maybe Derek's California little table of Derek's tax rate and limit along with family, but we'll save that for another day and time. We have line item detail, like here's a single account advertising. Maybe I want to break it out into maybe additional line item details. That way, when you, my boss, are reviewing my budget, you can maybe see why Derek is budgeting this item, including memos or notes that I can hover on top of, or better yet, I'm going to click on this button to show the annotations column. And then over here to the right, with me turning on that little extra check mark for annotations column, this is what I'm going to call on the forward-looking side, because earlier I added a financial footnote on maybe a historical report explaining why I was over and under budget looking at the last month, but now here's maybe me explaining why I'm forecasting out amounts in the future. So Derek's time date stamp, when he added that memoir note and when, we have great little audit trail history, etc. Now as I save this budget data and then go full circle back, meaning, hey, here's my budget report. Now you or I can easily rerun this report, and then maybe this budget will now be my updated forecast of that screen I was last in, meaning I do not have to go to Excel hell. I don't have to manually import and export budgets to and fro any different databases and systems. This is all self-contained, one single product, process, and live sort of as they're doing so. All right, as I'm going to sort of wind down in the next 10 minutes, usually I reserve that some questions and answers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look briefly at the chat area for any maybe questions that came in. So excuse me as I do so. And secondly, as I start to maybe wind down in the next few minutes, I would like to maybe provide my email address for any follow-up questions that you have, and also some nice little takeaways. One would be, as I see maybe a mixed bag, I see maybe approximately half the people are on this call today are existing customers, and I'd say maybe approximately half are prospects, prospective customers. So especially for those prospective customers, we would definitely provide a nice little one-on-one demonstration where we can more role play and have it be interactive, where we can ask questions, especially us learning more of your process and points, how we can solve those. And second offer would be most of our existing Prospero customers took advantage of a great free trial version of Prospero, where we even can convert your FRx and Management Reporter reports into Prospero to, again, confirm and give you a nice little test drive of the system before you make any type of commitment. So that's no cost, no risk to you. So I'd like to personally invite those to that. You see my email in the lower right, Derek.Krebs at msxgroup.com. So please take advantage of that. And now as I open up another window, just give me a second here on the chat area. Now the question is, does that mean I can create and manage a budget within Prospero and upload it to Great Plains? Well, I could export the budget data to an external file and import into Great Plains, but no need to. And maybe I addressed that in this last little statement, but I'll maybe just make sure that was heard or me to convey that. That is this budget data. Yes, I could either grab it directly from my general ledger like Great Plains was asked about, but more often than not, I can avoid all those manual steps. So as I'm entering my little budget directly here inside this budget input screen, as I'm entering my budget directly into Prospero, I do not have to do manual exports and imports, because here is now our Prospero financial report comparing budget actual. That's real-time budget directly from the Prospero database. So thanks for that question. And there's probably a few others. So let me just quote a few other ones. Another question was, hey, Derek, I liked what I see here. What's the approximate time to implement the system? And conservatively, I usually say, maybe it might be a 1 week quick start for reporting, or maybe a 1 week quick start for the budgeting, but usually it falls lower than that. So I'd say 5 day, 40 hours approximate, but usually I'd like to have a nice little planning and scoping call to find out what your unique needs might be, because there might be some companies that are a little bit more intricate and detailed in their reporting and budget needs. Some might be a little bit simpler. So that'd be my general reply. And then if you have any follow-up questions to these, definitely I'll probably leave my email up here one more time as I'm looking at the chat window on a separate screen. The next question was, okay, Derek, can you tell me a little bit further about the installation? And my summary of that would be, there's really 3 main components to Prospero, and you have options. Now, the first part of my response is 3 main components to Prospero. One is a SQL database behind the scene, what we call my data warehouse, that stores this general ledger reports, the notes, the budget data, etc. Second piece of 3 outside the database is a client. And third is a little IIS web middle tier that allow the client and the database to talk to one another. Now, the second part of my response to the installation was, you have options. And I summarize that as 3 options. One is you can have Prospero be installed on your servers. Secondly, you might have a third party, let's say Great Plains. That was maybe 2 questions in the queue that people asked specifically about. How about instead of me having Great Plains on my servers, I'm actually having a third party host my Great Plains. So we have several customers where we actually install Prospero where your Great Plains or your general ledger system is hosted. And I call that a third party hosted. And finally, the third option, instead of your servers or a third party hosted, the last option is you can have MSX Group host this. So one example to that is Dynamics 365 has been a big market increase share in the last couple of years. And most of those Dynamics 365 customers have MSX Group hosted that versus Microsoft hosted systems. But we have easy navigation and talking of the databases to one another at whatever interval you want to refresh this data as, like hourly, every minute, etc., even on demand, which is another part of another question I saw in the queue. 3 or 4 more questions I'm going to try to field in time permitting. One was perhaps on my note about, this is coming from an existing customer. They're like, Derek, I loved when you added this new feature. Tell me where I can submit product feedback. So maybe 2 things in that regard. One would be in Prospero, onto this home ribbon, 2 things, a great online help, and secondly, feedback and support. Well, let me just talk briefly in the line set, because if I wanted to see what the different field did or allowed me to do, what I'm doing universally in the product is I just hit the F1 button on my keyboard. So universally in Windows applications, the F1 is just a hotkey to open up the line set. It knew exactly I was in the line set, and I can come up here and I could look at, let's say in my little segment area, I can do, let's say, ranges, wildcards in a few different fashions, including probably leveraging the summary account. So that might be one item of 2 of great online help. Another related to that is, okay, Derek, I know you guys have some great training and user guides. So any of our existing customers, if you do not have the training and user guides, by all means, jot my email down. I'll be sure to give you a link to the latest, greatest of those. And then finally, related to online help, or at least help in general, or feedback, is on that same earlier home ribbon. I was talking about the Prospero help here moments ago, the F1 button. Here is this feedback and support. And there might be 2 primary things I might want to share with the MSX group in this window. One might be a product suggestion of how I might want a new feature to help shape the product direction. Or secondly, it might be an issue or a support request, and I call that a hotline into our support team. So we have a large team that mans that throughout and womans that throughout the day. So we get back to you ASAP. I think support says about 4 hours max, but usually it's minutes we get back to you. So again, I applaud the very in-depth and experienced team that get a lot of accolades and praises to such. All right, I think I've answered all the questions in the queue. Let me look back one more window here. All right. Some concluding remarks would be a big thank you for joining me today. There'll be recordings of these sessions we'll put out to the website, and those that attended and registered, I'll definitely be sure to send you a follow-up email. Thank you. So if we could help you, as I alluded to, like a nice little one-on-one demonstration or even the trial version, I'll be a nice little contact for that. But otherwise, have a great rest of your day and week, and we'll see you at a future webinar. Goodbye.